Hi you guys, so I wanted to go over some of the reds that I use and tell you why I like them and why I don't like them, and also tell you some of the reds that are popular today that I don't choose to use. So today I want to look at three reds, and there are three reds that I use quite commonly, but only one of them is on my palette that right now that I'm going to share with you, and that's Naphthol red. The reason why I chose Naphthol red is because it was recommended on this website that I'm going to tell you guys quite a bit about. It's handprint.com, and then you go to the watercolor paint section, and the person that created this website did extensive tests on all these different watercolor paints, and he looks at several different things. He looks at what he calls drying shift, which a drying shift is how bright the color looks when you put it down when it's wet, and then when it dries, does it get dull or does it stay nice and bright? So he looks at that. He looks at how light fast something is. So he does his own light fastness test to see if you put a color in the sun, does it fade out over time? How much does it granulate? How much does it blossom when it's in wet? So the color that comes to mind that just explodes when you drop it into the wet water is the Naphthol, no, not Naphthol, phthalo blue. If you put a puddle of water on your paper and drop the phthalo blue into the puddle, it just goes, so it's really fun. But it gets out of control, it's so strong. But anyway, we'll talk about that when we do blues. Today we're going to do reds. So another thing that I learned that's really interesting, I did not realize this, but two of the colors that I have in my toolbox, literally I have a toolbox full of paints, is the fact that this is Holbein. Holbein Permanent Red is made with the same chemical pigment as my very favorite M-gram Naphthol red. They're the same pigment, just by different manufacturers, and they have a little bit of difference in how they act on the paper, but not much. So I thought that was really interesting. So I made that discovery as I was making this video. So it's really useful once in a while to go and do some deep research on the colors that you're using and see, what am I using? Why am I using it? And is there a better alternative? Because I have found a lot of much better alternatives to paint colors that I've used in the past by doing this kind of research. And some of my favorite colors that I was using, I would go on this handprint.com website, for example, and I would find out, hey, this is not light fast. This is not going to be a good permanent color. Usually that's the reason why I've stopped using a color. The color that I'm thinking of is vermilion, which is this gorgeous tangerine orange red. It's just beautiful, but it is not very light fast. So I stopped using it, and I hated that because it's just so pretty, but what are you gonna do? So anyway, without further ado, let's look at these reds more closely. These three reds that I have for you, and you can make your own choices, but here's why I use the red that I do. All right, so let's try some of these reds. And the reds that I'm going to try, they're all quite beautiful and have something to offer in their own right. I'm just going to dab some out because this tube is ancient. That's the beautiful thing about watercolor, though. They, as long as you can re-wet them with water, usable. They don't go bad. Even when they dry up, the tube is not officially bad. So you never throw out a tube unless it's completely permanent. Red are the ones we'll be looking at today. And let's see how this permanent red mixes with ultramarine. So I'm going to pull some down, mix in some ultramarine. Beautiful. Now I'll mix it with some quinacridone gold, which is the yellow I have on my palette right now. Although I need another yellow, thinking about adding aureolin back onto my palette. But that makes a very lovely wash of orange. Perfectly acceptable. Next we have cadmium red. Now, I don't know if you can see, but this is a lot chalkier. This is a much grayer purple when I mix it with ultramarine blue. Let's try it with the quinacridone. Pull some over here. Get some quinacridone yellow going. Cadmium red is a warm red, so it will make a pretty mix. Perfectly acceptable. So if you actually want a grayer purple, maybe use cadmium red. But it's just a little bit chalky to me. Now we'll mix this with my red of choice, which is naphthol. And that is naphthol red and ultramarine. Now let's try it with the quinacridone. This is another reason why I like naphthol. It mixes equally well with blues or yellows. This just glows. I just love the naphthol red. This purple, I wish you could see it even better. It's just a beautiful mix. It's kind of granulating out a little bit. It's got a lot of character because the red is kind of separating a tiny bit from the ultramarine, and it's just making a very interesting purple. This is almost completely gray with the cadmium red. Now the cadmium red with the quinacridone gold is a prettier mix because this is a warm red. Warm meaning it has more yellow in it. If it was cooler, it would have more blue in it. Now the permanent red and the ultramarine blue is drying out very lovely. It's a very nice red. A lot of artists use permanent red. I just shy away from it because I think it's a little bit more staining than the naphthol. I am on the handprintcom website now, and I will show you a little bit about what I want to tell you guys about. So this is what the web page looks like. Okay, and you can go through and look up different colors. So I looked up naphthol red, and the first naphthol red that is listed is this pigment called PR9. That's the industry name for it. So it is fugitive. Fugitive means it does not, it's not light fast. It will fade. But if you go down to the naphthol red that I use by M. Graham, it's a different pigment that they use. So I really like M. Graham's okay, here it is, naphthol red. It is pigment PR 112, naphthol red by M. Graham. And you can go on the website and read all about what this guy says about naphthol red. But and I think this is why I bought it years ago, is because I read this on the website. It says M. Graham naphthol red is gorgeous, high quality red paint, transparent, bright, moderately active, wet, and somewhat responsive to re-wetting. It throws off a delicate texture of tiny pigment flakes in juicy washes. And if you look at that, you can see how there are little flakes of red in the wash, and it just makes it a very interesting looking color on the paper once you mix it. So M. Graham's Naphthol Red is highly recommended. However, Naphthol Red by other brands is not recommended, so make sure that you get the right Naphthol Red when you buy this. Okay, let's look at cadmium red a little bit closer. Okay, now this, another concern about cadmium to me, it has a warning on it. It says, do not spray apply. This product contains cadmium, a chemical known in the state of California to cause cancer. So, if you inhale it. So overall, it's going to be safe for how you're going to be using it with watercolor, but that's just one more thing. Light fastness 1. So you can find out a lot of different things just by looking at the packaging of these paints. I'm trying to find where the paint, the actual paint name is, the industry, the P whatever. But okay, I'm not finding it. But let's look on Handprint to see what Windsor Newton Artist Watercolor. This is another thing you want to make sure you get the Artist Watercolor if you're buying Windsor Newton, not the student grade. So pay attention when you're buying, especially Windsor Newton. They have a student line and they have a professional line. Never get the student line. It's just not going to be nearly as good. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this is just straight cadmium red by Windsor Newton. So I'm looking it up, and it's pigment PR108. This says it's a top 40 pigment. It's very light fast, opaque and staining, very intense red orange, orange red to dark valleyed intense red. So that means it's a warm red. That's why the cadmium red did not mix well with blue, because it has a lot of yellow in it. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's also very expensive, as it notes here. It was commercially introduced after 1910. It has an excellent light fastness rating. It says Windsor Newton is the most orange of any orange red, and it's good for figure and portrait painting. Now, this author is saying that he likes to paint with cadmium with the blues because they create moody darks. So if you're doing landscape painting, which I don't do as much, it makes nice moody darks, which that would be a fun experiment. The major drawback to cadmium is price. Okay, so I'm looking up this permanent red by Holbein, and it's so funny. I never made this connection, but the Naphthol Red by M. Graham is the same pigment as Holbein permanent red. And you guys, it's just so confusing because so many different manufacturers call different things, different colors, different names, and sometimes like the naphthols are different pigments altogether from different manufacturers, and it's very confusing. That's why this handprint.com is so useful. But I just found out that this permanent red is the same pigment as this Naphthol red, and that's interesting because I'm looking at the two of them and they are very similar in characteristics. I think this Naphthol red by M. Graham is much richer than this permanent red by Holbein. It's funny because the M. Graham Naphthol red is recommended as a gorgeous high quality red paint. That being said, this author of handprint.com is saying that you need to use caution because these pigments have light fastness tests that have been done that disagree. Different chemical suppliers do different tests, and some find that it's permanent and others find that it's not light fast. Many artists avoid all naphthol pigments as possibly too impermanent. And clearly the watercolor paint brand matters because there's so many different ones available by different manufacturers. No wonder this permanent red and this naphthol red look so similar. And I wish I had alizarin crimson in my palette, because then that would be a different color altogether to test with you. But like I was saying, the reason why I don't use alizarin crimson is it's just too staining. It's a very strong color. That being said, it does make some very beautiful dark mixes. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's just kind of mind-blowing, all the different colors and different brands available out there. And that's why a website like this, I think, is so useful to consult before you buy too many colors. And anytime I think about buying a new color or trying a new color, I come to this website, handprintcom, and just see what he says, because he's done extensive tests on all these colors. That's very helpful, because it can get expensive to buy a bunch of different paints and then find out you just don't like them. Okay, you guys, so that's it, and those are my favorite reds. And really, I only have one red on my palette right now, and that's the M-Gram Naphthol Red. And I specifically found that red by looking on this handprint.com website that I told you about. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope it will at least inspire you to go do some more research on the reds that you may have. And you can read a little bit of history on them. You can find out what their characteristics are. Sometimes on handprint.com he'll have suggestions about good mixes to use with whatever red you may be using, or you may find a great replacement for the red that you are using. So just go and look and research your reds that you are using and see if there's a better alternative. And it could just be interesting to see what his test found for the reds that you are using. So also, I would also love to hear your comments about your favorite red. What red are you using, or what reds do you use and why? So be sure to comment below. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. It always helps me grow my channel if you like my video, and if you leave a comment, I always really appreciate it. So thanks so much, and I hope you guys have a good week. Bye.